Hey, I'm Will LaVeist. He's Eric ClaVille. You tune into LaVeist and ClaVille. Give it to you straight the way it is from Black male's perspective. We're going to get right to it. This show, Black Fatherhood, one of my favorite holidays, Father's Day, is coming up soon in June. And you can expect to hear speakers and writers reinforcing, all kinds of negative stereotypes about Black fathers, like us being absent and being worthless and so forth and so on. So what we're going to do in this series and talking about Black fatherhood is dispelling a lot of those myths, a lot of those, raggedy stereotypes that are really are destructive and designed to really break down the Black family and not have us to be all that we can be and realize who we are. And the fact, the truth of the matter is Black fathers are actually dispelling those stereotypes all of the time and actually achieving and being engaged with our children against the odds. And so, again, with me being both a father of three and a grandpa, I take being a father, Black father, very seriously. And so we are going to spend some time, again, connecting some real dots and giving some real information about what's going on in our community. Right, Eric?
Absolutely. Will, I'm really excited about this series, Black Fatherhood, because one of the most exciting aspects of my life, and one that I'm so humble and grateful to be, that's to be called father. I'm somebody's father, somebody's dad, somebody's daddy.
Right.
And God's blessed me with sons. Of course, I believe that God gives everybody what they can handle.
Right.
He gave me boys.
Yeah. Well, he gave me both. But I'm telling you that the daughters is more than a notion of blessing. You should every man should have a daughter. I tell you, it will definitely pull something out of you that you didn't realize was there. But go ahead, bro.
Yeah, well, look, I'll wait for my daughter and also my granddaughters.
I'm gonna talk to the wifey about that, man. See if I can lobby on your behalf.
But Will is being a father and is one of the greatest joys of my life.
Absolutely.
I never forget the day that my wife told me that she was pregnant. with child. I was elated. From that day, my life changed. As a matter of fact, one of my best friends said, man, Dad, he said, Eric went from cool to dad in like one day. I was the, as we say, the soccer dad. I was the PTA, on the PTA as vice president. I was the homeroom dad. I was the one getting all the boys together. Let's go, to the park. Let's go to this museum. Let's go to this, fun place to go to.
Right.
Go to this speech, this MLK Day celebration. Everything that I took my sons to, I always asked them to invite their friends.
Right.
I loaded up the minivan, or as I like to call it, the swagger wagon. I loaded it up, and we just rolled. We had fun. I made fatherhood fun, and I do miss some of those days. I will be honest with you. As my son shaved more than me these days, I do miss those days where my little boys are there, and I kiss them and I pray for them before I leave the house and go to work or whatever the case may be. And when I come back, they run to me and grab me on the legs, and we go outside. Sometimes we throw a baseball. Sometimes we shoot some hoops. Sometimes we'll just do whatever. We'll go ride the bike up in the neighborhood. And it's those aspects of being a father that I take with me, and I'm just like, wow, what a blessing it is to be a father.
And then they become teenagers. But before that, I absolutely echo what you're saying, man. Especially when you talked about encouraging your children to invite their friends. And one of the things that God has blessed me with, I remember my sister telling me this, that in observing how many of my children's friends come by the house. And oftentimes, some of the situations, maybe their father wasn't in their lives, or there was other dysfunctions going on and they didn't have that closer relationship. And so my house oftentimes was that place where a lot of kids always were. Yeah. And so I've was able to, talk with them, share, impart wisdom. And, as a father, a lot of times, your own children see you as that's just dad and that constant person that's there. And oftentimes that's is really there and getting on your nerves and really not allowing you to do things. But oftentimes when other children, they kind of see you from that different perspective, that village perspective. And sometimes when you as a fellow parent, you're able to reinforce maybe some things that they're hearing in their home. You give them a different model, something else to compare to realize that their home situation may not be as bad as it is, or if it is a tough situation, that there is another way. There's another way of doing things. And I was just recently, it was just yesterday, man, I was with two of my other daughters, Angela and Tony, who are both very successful now. Tony's a lawyer out in LA. Angela, her older sister, is an IT, specialist in the DC area, and they came by, with their friends and stuff and visited me. And again, these are young ladies that were around my home, in my home. I actually got a chance to see, grow up. And so it's a blessing, too, that you can have that kind of effect on other people's children. A lot of my son's friends, I've been blessed that now they're older and having sons. I'm thinking about one right now that's out in Virginia. And he just had a son, Dex. He just had a son. He's actually in Hampton. And I was talking to him the other day, and he was telling me about how, some of the things that he saw in my household, and when I would interact with, I would explain things. It helped him understand some of the things that his dad was saying to him that maybe he didn't like at that moment, but now as he's a father, he's able to understand and appreciate it. And he actually thanked me, and he blessed me. He said, man, I never told you this, Pop, because he called me Pop, and a lot of them would do that. He said, man, I never told you this, man, but I really appreciate you. So it becomes a blessing, man. And the truth of the matter is, we're talking about this, and yes, we're tooting our own horns, but there's a lot of brothers who are doing and have done the exact same thing, and we often do not get talked about. You hear about the negatives, you hear about the fathers that are not in the household, or the fathers that had some kind of dysfunction and is in prison or something to that effect. So we absolutely, in this series, want to celebrate those dads, the majority, who are the majority in our community, who are doing the right thing and trying to do their best by their children every single day. What are some of those topics that you were talking about we want to hear?
Yeah, so as a matter of fact, I remember, I grew up in the 80s. I'm an 80s baby, born in the 70s, but I grew up in the 80s.
Right.
And, all of my friends, we all knew, our friends, it was a mom and dad, dad and mom.
Right, right.
And of course, even if there was a divorce or a separate, because back then people didn't divorce, they separated, because divorce was looked up on as being not a good thing, especially because a lot of families went to church. So you would separate for a little while, but everybody had their mom and dad, so, we live in a time period now where persons may not know who their father is, but we grew up in a time where, like I said, everybody that we knew who their mom and dad was. There may be some tragedy that took place. I know some people, parents were lost because we were coming out of the 60s, where, those individuals, those GIs that went over and, of course, had children before they went to the Vietnam. My father was in the Army at that time, and they ended up dying, over there. So their children were left. Of course, we grew up, but they knew who their father was. It's not that they left, but he gave his life for his country. The other aspect about that is, I talk about being on the PT. I talk about being the soccer room dad. I mean, the soccer dad. I talk about being the dad that, bring all the kids over to the house and let's go do this and let's go do that.
Right.
I learned that from my father.
Exactly.
And one aspect that we're going to talk about in the Black Father series is our fathers. My father is not only my greatest example, but he's also my greatest friend. And persons say we're like twins, but I get a lot of, he was a true man that not
old school.
Oh yeah, he was old school now. let's make no mistake about that.
Because I can hear you pausing and hesitating. When you got out of line, you was having a little flashback. I know you was old school.
But Will, even at the same time, my father was one who, I'm in the middle of 7 children, right? So I'm in the middle of 7. I don't ever remember. It's not like we didn't have anything to eat. We always had food, always had clothes. Right. My father was a businessman. He had a job at the same time. We owned a child care center in our community for 21 years.
Wow.
The ClaVille or ClaVille Daycare Center. We had a pickup at the height of it. I think we had 75 kids, 65, 75 kids, bus service, dropping kids off at school and stuff like that. And he ran it. And that was his vision. That's what he wanted. He and my mother, who passed away, unfortunately, when we were in high school, and my father raised us, my brother and I, along with our twin sisters.
That's right.
5 and 6 years old at the time before my father, God bless my father, with our second mother. So, he was there. Not one night did he not come home. Right.
That's right. Yeah.
I don't have those stories to tell. We were always in vacation Bible school. My mother ran vacation Bible school, so we were there. We were always at church every Sunday, day and night, Friday, and also choir rehearsal in the middle of the week. My father was a deacon and then became an elder, which he still is,
right?
Church of God in Christ, but not only that, but he got up every day, went to work, and he not only did all that, but he was my sister's PTA president at their elementary school. He was also the father who bought the snow cone machine and made snow cones or snowballs. For us, the kids in the neighborhood, we did it. Of course, we sold it at church and other events. But we broke out the snow cone machine. Not only that, but he also was the one when we said, "Dad, I want to do this. I want to go. I want to be a debater." Right?
Yes.
When he didn't have the money to pay for the trip, I remember him getting off of work and going, and we went to go. Of course, we wanted to be with our dad all the time. So wherever he went, we were like his shadows, my brother and I.
Right.
He would go cut somebody's grass, and I'm just thinking we're just helping our dad, but that was the money that he was getting me to go on a debate trip. Wow. Not only that, but I wanted to be in the orchestra, play violin, which I did through elementary, middle, and high school, the half of high school. And he bought that instrument. They would come to those performances. We would go on those trips, whether it be, to Chicago, or whether it be to Dallas, or whether it be to Colorado to go snow skiing. He made sure that we had whatever we had. We were there, but not there in support, but also he was there as a mentor, talking to me about life.
He was a man. He was a dad.
Showing me the spiritual side. And again, I looked at my father, and I still look at him today. He turns 80 this year.
That's a blessing, yeah.
Still has his faculties, as sharp as a tack, the whole nine. And I look at him today, and I looked at him then, like I said, as being my greatest example of being a man, a greatest example of a man of how to love the Lord, a great example of a man who's faithful to his family, and a great example and my greatest friend. So the things that I do, when people say, "Oh, it's so wonderful what you do with your kids," I always say, "Well,
he modeled it.
Father did it too."
You had a great model. Yeah, I mean, I share that in the sense that, my dad passed in 2018. He was 94. And unfortunately, my parents divorced when I was 12. But the thing, and I'm the youngest of 6 in all. And so I'm the youngest, and now everybody's almost just about out the house. And, I'm 12, and his presence was absolutely missed, not being in the house. But the thing about him is that he didn't disengage. He stayed involved.
That's the key.
He continued to come and get me. He continued to show up at the sports events. He continued to show up at school. So he very much was a model that even both of us, in your situation, unfortunately losing your mom to death, their marriage ending through the death of divorce.
Yeah.
He did what many Black men continue to do today, which is stay engaged with their children, regardless of what the situation is going on with the mama. And this is oftentimes something that is not really talked about. We continue to get just the negative narratives about fathers who are not involved. Now, let's be honest. There are a lot of fathers who are not involved. There are absolutely a lot of fathers who are deadbeats. They're absolutely. And I can't for the life of me understand how someone can have a child and know they have a child, right? And someone in their right mind, if someone is, on drugs or is something mental or some other kind of situation going on that really incapacitates them or is a major barrier to being engaged, you can understand that. That does happen. That is a reality, But for somebody to be aware and know you have a child and you're not going to be engaged with that child, to me, that's reprehensible.
Absolutely.
And I have zero tolerance for that, because what ends up happening is you now take that pain and transfer that pain on to a child who will eventually become an adult who has to deal with this kind of pain, this kind of wounding that is of no fault of their own. And these are the kinds of things that we absolutely, want to tackle. And, one of my books that I've written is Dear Daughter, and where I give advice on love, pain, healing, marriage. It's really me talking to my daughter, but also talking to my sons and talking to predominantly women who didn't have their fathers in their life, and kind of giving them that kind of advice, giving that kind of conversation that fathers give to daughters, but fathers also ought to be giving to their sons. Because one of the other things that's often a misnomer is men tend to think, well, like in the case of a daughter, she got the mom and she don't really need me. No, buddy, absolutely she needs you, because just like Eric, just like you described how your father modeled manhood for you, modeled taking care of his family for you. I talk about how my dad did that for me. Your daughter needs to see you doing that as well, because it's going to impact the kind of decisions that she makes about the kind of man that she wants to have in her life. So we're going to talk about and tackle all those kinds of issues, including how important it is to be a village, and how important it is that you can still father children who are not biologically your children.
Right.
Whether it's the friend that's of your son or your daughter that's coming by the house, you can still model fatherhood for children who are not biologically yours.
Right. So we'll, like I said, we've talked about the joys of fatherhood from our perspective. We're going to delve into it more. We've talked about our experience of experiencing fatherhood from our fathers and also father figures. And, again, you talked about, as we will expound upon, the deadbeats, individuals who are not engaged with their children. And that's an aspect.
By choice.
Absolutely. And I think that's also, we'll look at how society, especially popular culture, creates an environment or the illusion that this is something that's cool, or we create these negative stereotypes of baby mamas and things of that nature, or, I take care of my kids, I send a check. Again, it's not about the money. It's not about the relationship that you had with the mother of those children, but it's about the children now. I remember being told, and this is very true, and I say this, the moment that your child is born, that's when their life begins. And they say your life ends, but it's not that your life ends, but it's the pursuit of being selfish ends. When it's just you only think about yourself. So being selfish that's not used in a negative connotation. It's just reality. You take into consideration what you want to eat. You take into consideration where you want to go, when you want to get up, and what you want to invest your time, your money, your ingenuity in. The moment that child comes into this world, or even before, no more can you be selfish, but you have to be selfless. And that selflessness comes into effect because now I have to think about this phenomenal gift that only God can give. We can make a lot of things as men, but we cannot make children. That is a gift from God, a living soul, a living being that has the ability, the seed to become anything and even greater than us that are already here. And
you're preaching now, huh?
Hey, brother, look, again, when I talk about fatherhood, it's just not, I didn't read this from a book, right? I didn't read this from a book. It's what I've experienced. It's what I've seen. It's what I desire for not just myself, but my sons and my sons' sons. Because now the selflessness is not just for your children, but it's for your children and your children's children.
Well, you also talked about, when you say seed, it takes two to tango. And so one of the other things we absolutely have to talk about is how mothers play a role, particularly oftentimes when it comes to raising sons, is how mothers can play a role of helping that son and helping that father to reinforce fatherhood, or in the case of dysfunctional situations, a mother can play a negative role of causing, blocking opportunities for a father to really be that kind of impact on their child. And so these are things that are also happening in the community that we've got to address as well. So I'm one that I don't pull any punches when it comes to men doing what they should be doing for their children. I pull no punches at all. But there's also an accountability on the side of women. And I know when I think about my father and the kind of impact he had on me, I also have to give kudos to my mom as well, who, despite her anger, her frustration about their divorce in the marriage, she never positioned herself to block me from block her ex-husband for having a relationship with his youngest child. And in fact, she oftentimes would say to me, hey, be a man, take that to your father, go to your father. And so that signals something to me as a male child that, there's certain things, I could talk to my mom about, but there's still certain things that, this is the venue, this is the area for my dad, for me to chop it up with my dad on. So, kudos to the moms as well, who understand that, particularly when it comes to raising male children, and don't position themselves as impediment to their fathers having relationships with their children.
Absolutely. And the last aspect we'll talk about when we talk about Black fatherhood is, as you mentioned, the ability not just to raise your children, but mentor others. But then lastly, we want to talk about repairing, coming back into the lives of your children. I've heard that when we talk about Father's Day, in prisons, Father's Day is a time period where they have the greatest amount of cards left over. Mother's Day, they can't have enough cards, for Mother's Day. And again,
right,
to send thank you to the mothers. But
can't have enough cards and no restaurant space. Plenty of restaurant space for dads,
Like, absolutely.
Plenty of open tables, not for moms, but
So when we look from that aspect, we'll talk about how Black families, Black fathers can re-engage into the lives of their children. I was watching an episode of It's a Man's World. And of course, that's based upon the life and the adventures of Tamla Mann and her husband, who, of course, became famous from the Tyler Perry shows Meet the Browns. And of course, they were part of the singing group with Kirk Franklin and the family. And one show was that he met his father. And his children never met their grandfather. And they met in a restaurant and he talked about how, it was hard, being apart, from his father, the mother having to raise them by herself and things of that nature. And he's an old man. He's an older man. But he never disrespected him when he saw him. So hats off to him, Tamla Mann's husband, with that particular episode. Now, of course, we know that a lot of this stuff is made for TV, but for that particular episode, and then bringing the grandfather to the house where the children had a chance to talk to him and he had a chance to talk to them. So that's an example, Will, of how it's never too late to engage.
Right, never too late. Yeah.
Never too late to engage your family, because there's an aspect of fatherhood, like you said, just to know who your father is.
That's right. Just to know.
Where you come from.
It's key to your identity. It's key to how you see yourself moving in the world. And you see people who don't know that information. You see the struggles that it creates. So, we shouldn't take these things lightly at all.
Absolutely. And Will, look, I want to close this episode out. And of course, we're going to be talking about fatherhood, Black Fatherhood, all through the month of June.
Looking forward to it, man.
In ending our season 1, and it's a subject that's near dear to our heart. But I want to close this out with 3 scriptures, if I can.
All right, Reverend.
Psalms 127, verse 4-5, tells us that as arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth.
All right.
Happy is the man that had his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gates. He says, as arrows in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth. To be a skilled archer, I don't know if you ever watch archery or seen archery, but yes. that is a skill where you're not just pointing, a rifle, but you're
not just spraying. That's precision, man. That's focus. That's purpose.
Absolutely. And you think about where that archer, where he points that arrow, wherever he points it, but also how far he brings it back in is both the resistance.
Okay.
The velocity and the target. So wherever you point that arrow, that's where it's going to go.
Well.
So now, as a father, whenever we point that arrow,
yes, sir,
our children,
yes, sir,
high we point the velocity, and to keep in mind, you don't have to pull it back too far.
No, not too far,
but you let it go just right. That's where our children. That is the responsibility of fatherhood. It also tells us in Proverbs 13:22, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's
children. Amen.
Will, what that tells me is that at that moment, this puts our life goals, our life desires, our vision, our legacy, our everything that we're doing at the center of choosing how we spend our time, how we spend our money, where we put our children, the places that we take them, and the like.
And it'll bear fruit. It'll bear good fruit.
Absolutely. And then finally, I'd just like to end with this. Psalms 127:3. It simply says that children, or an inheritance of the Lord. And the fruit of the womb is his reward.
That's right.
As fathers, we are given the phenomenal responsibility and privilege to handle God's inheritance. How beautiful is that?
Amen, preacher. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to chopping it up.
Well, just like you, I mean, I think our listeners can tell we love being fathers. And there's no perfect scenario, but there is always the opportunity to do better the next day and to get it right. So for those of you, again, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of LaVeist and ClaVille as we introduce our series of Black Fatherhood. Again, follow us on our social media, like, share, follow, and also let us know what you think on our Facebook page and give us your comments. What are some of the topics that you want us to discuss? What are some of the comments that you have about this episode? Let us know and engage. So until next time, to us, that's the way it is. We'll see you.